So in your article, Partners in Crime, the Anti-Intellectual Complicity Between the State and the Universities in Turkey, you're describing how the University of Administration teamed up with the state by exploiting the economic vulnerability of the economic labor force to silence and punish critical voices in the universities in Turkey. Yet you had the courage to sign the Peace Petition of the Academics for Peace in 2016 and was dismissed from your office as a professor and got banned from public service in Turkey as a consequence of action. So my question for you is, what drives you to stand up for your values and considering all the personal consequences that you have been through?
Thanks for this question, and thanks for reading the article. It's always nice to see that people are interested in my work and in what happened in Turkey. Well, what drives me in the first place is when you take action, when you take political action, the consequences are not the first thing that you think about or that you should think about. I rather think of the consequences of not taking action at all. And they seem more dangerous to me, more risky to me in a collective historical sense. And I usually act with a sense of urgency and with a sense of responsibility, because I think that those who are aware of what's going on should raise their voices. Knowledge is responsibility. Knowledge gives you the responsibility to share that knowledge and share your insights on what's going on. And, you know, who else should do that if not academics? We have a social responsibility. We have a public responsibility. If we have the luxury to get endowed with the knowledge about what's going on in the world, there should be a reason to it. And there should be a consequence to it as well. I have a responsibility to share that knowledge and act upon it. And if I see something going off, I should raise my voice. This is the least I can do. And that was the kind of feeling that I had when I was signing the declaration, and I never regretted it. And in fact, I may have said this during our seminar, I can't remember, but I always think about that whenever someone asks me, would you have done so if you knew what was going to happen afterwards? I say, I would have signed the declaration 1,000 times more if I knew that this is the way the state and the universities would react, because their reaction showed me that I was actually doing something right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, our second question for you is the following. So as a sociologist, you're focusing on academic precarization, but where do you think your interest for this topic is coming from the beginning?
Well, it's pretty easy, actually. I was working at a private college in Turkey, and I don't know if you're familiar with the working conditions at private colleges. They function a little differently than state universities. To start with, there's no job security for anyone apart from the administrative cadres. That means the academic staff works on yearly contracts. And we were expected, I mean, I was an assistant professor when I started, and we were expected to teach like 13 hours a week. And we were expected to be at the office 40 hours a week, and regardless of the fact whether it was semester break or not, which is in itself super irrational, even from a capitalistic point of view. Me being in the office during semester break is just additional costs for the institution, and they were not even, you know, in a position to see that. Anyways, that sort of imposition makes you think about the working conditions and what keeps you at bay for the institution. So that was actually the main reason why I started to work on academic precarity. I mean, I was working on the precariat and precarization and downward social mobility before that. But through my insights on precarity in general, I realized, okay, there's a reflection of this systemic dynamic also in the academic sector, and it is affecting me on a personal basis. So I should do something about it. I should apply my sociological knowledge, my analytical skills to what is affecting me at the moment. And, you know, the profession that means so much to me is under attack. I should use my sociological imagination and my sociological skills to analyze what's going on. So that was what prompted me to work on academic precarity.
Yes, and you have also underlined the fact that there is a lack of studies on precarity in the labor field. So we were wondering, why do you think that this subject is underrepresented?
Well, there's not a lack of studies on precarity in labor studies, but on academic precarity. And the most important reason, in my opinion, is the fact that academics usually do not think of themselves as workers. And academic work is not usually seen as a sort of wage labor. Academics like to think of themselves as above and beyond wage labor. And it is usually accompanied by this typical motto, we're not doing this for money. Yes, you're not, I mean, you may not be doing this for money, but it doesn't change the fact that you still need money and that what you do is work. I mean, the fact that you love what you do does not make it any less work, right? And maybe back in the 19th century when there was, you know, more of a civil servant status to academic work, people may have thought of themselves as civil servants in the first place and not wage laborers. But in the 21st century, with a drastic change, both in the demographics and labor process of the academic sector, we cannot claim that anymore. I mean, we are wage workers, and we should approach academic work as a sector within the economy, which it is. It's $1 billion industry, actually. And we should find a way to integrate academic work into labor studies. So, and to do so, I think in the first place, we need to eliminate some illusions and myths about academic work being beyond wage labor or being something exceptional. There's no exceptionality to academic work. It is work, and it's $1 billion industry. So yeah, this is what I think.
Okay, thank you. And our second question is about interviewing. And when it comes to interviews, there's many important aspects to look at. For example, that it should be morally correct, or that the informant is kept anonymous if he or she wishes so. So our question is, how would you deal with a situation if the person you're interviewing would reveal something big about an academic institution, for example, something similar to the scandal in Germany that you spoke about in class, where the academic freedom was put at stake?
Well, as you say, one of the most important things in interviews is to respect the confidentiality and to respect the interviewee's requests, because you have a responsibility towards your interviewees as well. You have to protect them, and you have to be worthy of their trust in you. I mean, people are confiding in you stuff that they might have not do so publicly. So if this should be the case, like if, and there have been cases like this actually in my interviews, both with German precarious researchers and with peace academics. People reveal things that might be seen as scandalous. And I usually approach this very openly. I ask whether I could use this information, whether this should be off the record, because the institution might be compromised. I mean, you may not use the names of your interviewees or the names of the institutions, but if you reveal something very spectacular and particular, people who know that institution might easily guess which institution you're talking about. So what I do is to talk about this very openly with my interviewee and ask them whether I can use this information, to what extent I can use this information, to what extent they wish this information to remain anonymous, and if they want the institution to be not disclosed, how can we, you know, keep it as anonymous as possible. These are the things that you should talk about very openly. I mean, what we're doing here is not magic or not wizardry. It's just an interview, and it's about knowledge production and dissemination. And we should be very transparent about it. I mean, you should be able to talk about these questions with your interviewees. I mean, they are giving you information, but you should give them information as well. You should say, hey, this is an interesting point, and I would like to use this information, but to what extent can we, you know, arrange confidentiality and not compromise any important facts? These are, I mean, and my luxury is, of course, is that I work with academics. My interviewees are always academics who are familiar with these problems. So I can like literally consult them about this, not only inform them, but I can ask for consultants. You know, these are usually social scientists that I'm interviewing, and I can like literally go ahead and ask, hey, what do you think we can do? How shall we use this information? How can I use this data? What would be the method, and how can I protect your you know, anonymity and stuff like this? So this makes it, of course, much easier for me.
Okay. Do you believe that there should be limitation of what institution can do under the umbrella of academic freedom? For example, hiring people on 0-hour contracts? And also, should stakeholders have limit in their influence on universities' ability to hire and fire academics they do not agree with? And who has the responsibility to enforce this?
The thing, when you say shareholders, you mean the funding bodies, right? Like foundations and the European Commission, European Research Council, etc. Like the funding bodies, right? The shareholders. Well, they do not dictate whom to hire. They do not dictate whom to fire. It works in a much more subtle way. It's rather, you know, you create structures of peer review, and you create, if we're talking about the funding bodies, you create guidelines as to how to prepare a proposal, or which topics and which fields are of interest for a certain period of time. And these pretty much dictate the research agendas and the cadres who are supposed to pursue these research agendas, right? I mean, they do not openly dictate names or profiles, but they set the guidelines, and everything that does not fit those guidelines will be eliminated automatically. This is what I mean, actually, when I say that academic freedom can be curtailed in a much more subtle fashion than just, you know, sending people to jail. The market mechanisms subtly dictate their own agendas. And the question how this can be prevented is actually beyond the scope of my powers and my imagination at the moment, because I'm not in a position to propose a solution to that single-handedly. We're talking about an entire industry and an entire system based on capital accumulation, and this industry, I'm talking about knowledge production industry and academic scientific industry, they are not exempt from this main motto of the system, which is the maximization of profits. So even the knowledge industry is geared towards the maximization of profits, and you cannot create islands that are independent of this systemic postulate, actually. So what we need is to imagine another system, maybe.
And in your book, Academic Freedom and Precarity in the Global North, you are describing the dilemma of inhabiting contradictory positions as a team player within academia's circuits of exchange and as a critical voice from outside. How do you think one person should deal with the subservience to our academic careers without losing our critical thinking in general for academic freedom?
What do you mean by that? Do you mean this dilemma between compliance and resistance within the structures that you're working in, or
Yeah,
is
exactly.
that what you mean?
Yeah.
Well, this is in fact a problem that many non-tenured researchers and maybe tenured researchers as well face on a daily basis. Like, on the one hand, you may have a critical position towards a system that you're operating within, but on the other hand, you still have to operate within that system, right? I mean, you still have to deal with the funding bodies and their requests, university administrations, and their, of course, I mean, their choices are limited by the same system as well. We are all living in a capitalist world economy, and all our actions are predetermined to some extent by the maxim of capital accumulation. And this is a fact that we're facing. Like, we have to be very clear about this. I mean, I am critical of this system, but I also have to live within that system. And as a non-tenured researcher, especially as an early career, mid-career non-tenured researcher, you always face the danger of, you know, messing up your career chances, right? I mean, if you're too vocal about the problems in your sector, or about the inequalities and hierarchies that affect you, if you're too vocal about them, you may end up offending people who are in a position to decide on your research grants or decide on your job applications. And this happens actually more frequently than you might expect. Like, more frequently than you might expect, the research proposals get rejected that do not fit into the, you know, mainstream thinking in academia, especially when it comes to labor studies and working on academic precarity. I have friends in Germany who are, for example, very active in the anti-precarity initiatives of non-tenured researchers, and most of them think that their chances of ever obtaining a permanent position is already gone because they have been too vocal. You know, this is always this dilemma. On the one hand, you are in a disadvantaged position, and you find yourself compelled to talk about it for two reasons. First of all, because it affects you. You have to demand your own workers' rights. And second of all, because of your critical training, you think, okay, there is something wrong and I have to criticize it. But when you do, you end up at odds with people who are profiting from that system. And those are usually people in the decision-making mechanisms and people in tenured positions. And they see what you see as well, but they're so much entangled in it, and they're so much profiting from this structure where they can hire people who have almost the same qualifications as they have on a much, less costly position. They're going to continue to do so. And not because they do not see what's wrong with the system, but because their position depends on profiting from that sort of structural inequality. So in such a situation, you find yourself asking, where does academic freedom start and where does it end? Because on paper, we are all critical. But when it comes to our daily doings, and when it comes to, you know, conducting research and maintaining these knowledge-producing institutions, people just don't want to make waves. So how do we deal with this? This is a daily struggle, actually. I mean, if you decide for yourself, I'd rather raise my voice than accept this, you usually end up not advancing in your career, or not having the basic job security, or not getting those research grants that you definitely need. If you decide to not talk about it, you find yourself in an ethical dilemma of, like, you know, I see what's wrong and I should actually do something against it, but I have rent to pay and, you know, bills to pay, and I don't have the luxury to stand for my principles and values. In any case, you lose something. Either your own self-respect or the basic securities that you need to sustain a living.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Speaking about tenure, actually, it seems like it's a reserved privilege for a few in academia. And given that tenure can be seen as a broader employment protection that has been closely related to protecting the academic freedom, what alternative protection measures could there be for faculty members that do not yet have or will never gain tenure?
What do you mean? Like, what kind of an academic freedom concept can we have in order to protect the non-tenured faculty? Well, this is actually what we talked about in the seminar. And what we came up with in our edited volume was a capability approach to academic freedoms that decouples the concept of academic freedom from the fetters of the state as well. Because tenure in itself sounds like a good idea, but it's very much tied to the civil servant status in many contexts, which actually, you know, makes academics dependent on the state and puts them in a position where they have to represent the raison d'etat, which is not ideal, if you think about it, for critical knowledge production. And currently, considering the structural change in the demographics and labor process of the academic sector, whereby only a shrinking few of the academic workforce can even obtain tenure, we have the problem of eliminating the majority of the academic workforce from academic freedom at all. I mean, even from that very limited and problematic understanding of academic freedom that was tied to tenure, we are eliminating right now the majority of it. Like, we have to find a way to conceptualize academic freedom outside of tenure, because it's structurally unattainable for the majority and historically problematic because of its deep connection with the state as an institution. So we came up with this capability approach to academic freedom that is based on a positive freedom conception and not on a negative one that defines freedom as an exemption from external influences. We rather say we should emphasize the positive aspect of freedom that boils down to the capability of researchers to create research agendas and curricula and pursue them actively without fearing job insecurity and other consequences, like empowering people to make use of their training and their skill sets and the knowledge that they have accumulated. How this could be done legally, I cannot say because I'm not a legal scholar, and every academic environment, every academic system has its own peculiarities and its own unique relationship with other institutions like state and the public and private investors. For example, in Germany, you have a structure which is still very much bound to the state. Like, most universities are state universities, and tenure is still a civil servant status, whereas in the US, the situation is different, and the university, like the academic system, is much more multivariate, and there are different stakeholders involved. So this is a question that only, you know, local experts can formulate fully. But as a starting idea, we proposed in the edited volume that we should start thinking of academic freedom in a positive sense and not as a negative freedom. This is like a little piece of stone that we threw into the well to see, okay, people, let's start talking about this, right? I mean, we have a very one-dimensional academic freedom conception. we should actually change this because the sector is changing. The composition of the academic workforce is changing. So we have to come up with new conceptions. This is what we proposed so far, but it's an open-ended process.
Thank you very much. And then I have another question that is a little bit related to what you said earlier about private universities, maybe. And it is that in the global north, there are more checks and balances in public than in private universities. So do you think that professors in public universities have a better accessibility to academic freedom than those within private institutions?
If you mean by professors, tenured professors, they evidently have more access to state protection. Like, we have two concepts here that we have to define very clearly. First of all, professor. When you say professor, do you mean tenured professors? And academic freedom, when you say academic freedom, do you mean the negative conception of academic freedom that is in operation currently, that is understood as protection from undue influence, right? And if these are the definitions that you're working with, yes, I would confirm that full professors, like tenured professors at state universities, enjoy state protection because they are civil servants. And this is a luxury that the majority of the academic workforce, both in state universities and private universities, are excluded from. Or, I mean, the academic workforce that is not tenured. But this doesn't mean that it's ideal. I mean, the fact that, let's say, 8% in the German academic workforce enjoys state protection because they're civil servants doesn't mean that they enjoy critical freedom or freedom in the sense of capability. I mean, they have their own budgets and they have a lifetime of job security. But on the other hand, their rights as workers are pretty much limited by the definition of civil servants. Like, they are not allowed to organize, for example. They're not allowed to pursue labor activism. Not that they want to, because they're essentially conservative and they are essentially putting obstacles to other researchers organizing, because they're profiting from this system and from this type of discrepancy between the majority of the academic workforce and a little labor aristocracy. But still, even in an ideal hypothetical case, I cannot see something like this as a true freedom in a critical sense of the word.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, okay. I'll go. It is accepted that universities are fragmented based on their program expertise, and these factors, it is a factor that students need to consider when choosing a study program. This can be challenged for many students who may not have the option to move based on economic or social factors. Should it be the responsibility of university to provide funding for all programs? And is that a problem for academic freedom in the university, or is it a budgetary and therefore due to outside influences and a lack of staffing problem?
Well, it depends on the structure of the university, and it's also related to the demographic change of the university student body. With the expansion of the tertiary education, the problem of funding arose. That wasn't there in the first half of the 20th century, for example, right? I mean, in the first half of the 20th century, or up until the second half of the 20th century, only a handful of people could afford to go to college, or only a handful of people wanted to go to college, and funding was not a problem. And also related to that, unemployment was not a problem for college graduates. up until the last quarter of the 20th century even. But right now we have, I don't want to call it a problem because it's actually a progressive thing that, essentially a progressive thing that more people are able to enjoy college education. But on the other hand, with that, other structural problems arise, like how are the states supposed to fund so many students? Or how are the labor markets supposed to absorb so many college graduates? And at this point, again, each academic environment has its own peculiarities. I mean, if you have more of a state-funded structure, like with strong state universities, where the college education is still public, you may say that if the universities offer programs, they should also think about what to do with those programs and how the students can afford to go to those programs, right? I mean, if you're offering that, you should also think of whether you can provide funding and necessary infrastructure for the students who might enroll in those programs. This is your responsibility. And you also have to think of what they are going to do once they graduate from those programs. This is, for example, a widely discussed problem in terms of graduate studies. We keep accepting more and more students to PhD programs, and the number of PhDs increase by like 2% every year, especially in the European higher education area. Whereas there are not enough vacancies to absorb that many PhD holders in the academic sector. So what are we doing? Creating a reserve army of labor. Like, we ourselves cannot find jobs in this academic labor market, and we help create more and more PhD holders every year. How are these people going to survive in this system, right? I mean, these are the things that actually both the states and universities and academics themselves have to think about. What are we perpetuating here? What kind of a system are we sustaining by not informing the students well about their future career chances, by admitting them into programs that they can barely afford, and afterwards that they can barely find any adequate jobs in the labor market? What kind of a system are we maintaining? Are we contributing to the creation of a disposable surplus labor force, of a huge army of unemployed and unemployable people? These are the problems that we have to address, and we have to address urgently, because the unemployment rates are rocketing.
Thank you for your answer. To change the topic a little bit, given the notion that refugees of higher academic or skilled expertise have prioritized rights for immigration, for example, in the European Union, creating a demographic of refugees that are skilled in certain areas. This is, of course, an immigration problem. Could you expand on how this and why this is also a problem for academic freedom?
Well, first of all, not all refugees with a college degree, or not all refugees with an academic background are privileged. There are, as you said, certain fields that are being prioritized, and this prioritization is being done in accordance with what the labor markets in the receiving countries need. In Germany, it's even more specific. It's being defined by what each locality needs in terms of labor force. So this, of course, creates a situation where people are being selected according to their expertise and not their own life choices or their own needs or whatever. But this is not surprising. I mean, as I said, and as I keep saying all the time, because I want the students to understand, we are living in a capitalist world economy. Everything, like every action, is geared towards maximization of profit, and the states and their immigration policies are not exempt from that. Of course, what defines the immigration policies is shaped by the expectations of the public and racist approaches, etc., and cultural convictions. But in the first place, what shapes the immigration policies is the needs of the labor markets. And again, the problem arises if we let people's lives or their career agendas or research agendas being shaped by the needs of capital accumulation. What does it say about the knowledge production in this system? Is knowledge production being done for the sake of knowledge production or for the sake of capital accumulation? To what extent can we say that the knowledge production in such a system is being done in terms of freedom? Of course, it is a limit on academic freedom, understood as a capability. And this is what we wanted to draw attention to in this volume when we said academic freedom does not only mean exemption from state oppression. This is only one side of the story. Academic freedom, including research and research agendas and curricula and people's career expectations and the well-being of the knowledge-producing workforce, etc. All these are being also delimited by market incentives. And I would say in terms of academic freedom, this is not an ideal situation.
Thank
But
you.
on the other hand, the question is, of course, what is an ideal situation? Could there be an ideal situation at all? I mean, I think it's about accepting that nothing can be ideal and there is no heaven, but we must still strive towards being worthy of it. We must still think that we can at least, come close to what is ideal. I mean, the fact that there is no ideal world does not mean that we should not strive towards an ideal world.
Thank you very much. I would like to actually follow up on that. Can you name good examples of countries that offer support services or policies for migrant workers to easily and effectively immigrate and continue their work or academic endeavors? And how do they achieve this?
I can't, because I'm not a migration scholar. I don't work on immigration policies of countries. And I can't just off the top of my head say this country's immigration policies are good and this country's immigration policies are bad. I mean, for a classification like this, you need expertise in immigration policies and legal frameworks, and I'm not a migration scholar. So this is outside of my field.
That's understandable. Thank you anyhow.
And academic freedom, as we've spoken a lot about, like it's a topic where you can find lots of different statements on what it means. So what do you think it's like the core in the academic freedom? Is there like a possibility that academic freedom is in crisis because of there is this different perspective from states and its meaning?
Well, there are not many different conceptions of academic freedom, and this is actually what we wanted to criticize in the edited volume. There is this one-dimensional approach that equals academic freedom to the absence of state oppression, and it's quite shallow and reductionist, and it's prevalent in the entire discourse. The entire discourse about academic freedom has been shaped by this sort of conception. And there's not much variation from that. And that was our starting point, actually. We wanted to criticize this and propose another approach to academic freedom, which is more nuanced and which takes into account other structural factors. And I don't know if academic freedom is in a crisis or whether there has been a time where academic freedom was unbridled. And of course, again, it depends on how you define academic freedom. I mean, if you reduce academic freedom to absence of state oppression, I mean, there are phases of contraction and expansion as to what type of oppressive mechanisms that the states use at any given time. Right now, we may have the feeling that academic freedom in the sense of exemption from state oppression can be in a contraction phase due to the rise of proto-fascist and authoritarian regimes in a lot of contexts. But again, as we try to draw attention in the edited volume, this is not where the story ends, because we are living in a world system and the oppression in the periphery is just the other side of the coin, or the same structural coin, that manifests itself as economic precarization in the core countries. So we can say maybe overall, like taking into account both the academic precarization in the core countries that we witness, you know, the decrease in job security that actually limits people's chances in the knowledge producing industry, and the political oppression in the peripheral countries. Both of them converge to contrive a very suffocating environment in terms of knowledge production in general. Yes, if that's what you mean by a crisis of academic freedom, we are certainly going through that. But on the other hand, we are going through a systemic crisis anyway. I mean, the modern capitalist world economy as a whole is in a crisis, and it affects all spheres of social life, all fields, all sectors, everything. So the academic industry is, of course, a part of that.
Okay, so our last question is about the future. And you might have touched on this a little bit, but it's what do you hope for academic freedom in the future? Like, how would the perfect academic freedom look like to you, if you even believe that it could be perfect? And what is a future outcome that you wouldn't wish for?
Well, first of all, I do not think of the future or human societies in terms of perfection. I don't think anything can be perfect or should be perfect. And what is perfect anyway? I mean, these are not the this is not the terminology in which we operate in social sciences, because perfect is much too subjective and vague. I think of these issues in terms of sustainability. I think of creating sustainable knowledge production structures and sustaining critical thinking. And for that, we certainly need a more dimensional conception of academic freedom that goes beyond the understanding of academic freedom as exemption from state oppression, or academic freedom that is tied to a civil servant status. And we need to take into account the changes in the demographics of the academic workforce and tailor our understanding or reshape our understanding of academic freedom accordingly in order to create more sustainable structures. Not perfect, sustainable, and meaningful. This is what I think. But as I said just previously, we are living in times of systemic crisis. Everything is scary. Everything is precarious, actually. And most of the time, when you hear the word future, you think of a dark tunnel, right? I mean, it's a scary thought. And as the great Frederick Jameson had said, and I love this quote, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism, because we all have been born into the system, and we have been, like, our characters and our expectations and our understanding of life have been shaped within the parameters of this system. So when we are going through the systemic crisis, we feel like everything is at an end, and it should rather end completely before I lose it, you know? Like, I mean, let's just leave this planet, let everyone die, and just, you know, get it over with. This is the kind of feeling that sometimes overcomes you. But then we should remember Homo sapiens has been on this planet for the last 150,000 years, and capitalism has emerged around the 16th century, and it has become a world system only in the 19th century. So it's like, you know, the point of a needle, if you compare it to the entire human history. Nothing ends. It's an unpleasant period to live in, personally, but we should still think of the future as something open-ended. And this open-endedness is currently very scary, because we are going through a difficult time as humanity. But it also means that everything is up for grabs right now. We can discuss and redefine everything. We can do better. It's also a chance to do better. When you hit rock bottom, it's also a chance to bounce back. This is how I like to think of it. It's like this Gramscian motto that I love: pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. And, you know, as students and scholars, it's our job to see the things as they are, in terms of, you know, how bad they look at the moment, without painting it pink. But we should also be optimistic about the ability of human beings to change the parameters within which they live, because that's what we've been doing throughout the entire history. This is actually what we call history, you know, the way human beings change the world and themselves. So yeah, perfect academic freedom is something that will never exist, but a sustainable conception of academic freedom would be a framework within which we could create optimistic solutions to pessimistic problems.